Welcome to our Learn Psychology series. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of stress. Life constantly throws challenges our way. We all have our unique methods to tackle these challenges. We put in extra efforts, mobilize all our resources, and lean on our support systems to overcome these challenges. Just like electricity, stress can be a powerful force. Challenges, problems, and difficult circumstances can lead to stress. If managed properly, stress can increase our chances of survival. It energizes us, heightens our arousal, and influences our performance. But remember, just as an electric current that's too high can cause damage, high stress can also produce unpleasant effects and cause our performance to deteriorate. Conversely, too little stress may cause one to feel somewhat listless and low on motivation, which may lead us to perform slowly and less efficiently. It is important to remember that not all stress is inherently bad or destructive. There are two types of stress: eustress and distress. Eustress is the term used to describe the level of stress that is good for you and is one of a person's best assets for achieving peak performance and managing minor crisis. Distress, on the other hand, is the manifestation of stress that causes our bodies wear and tear. Stress can be described as the pattern of responses an organism makes to stimulus event that disturbs the equilibrium and exceeds a person's ability to cope. The word stress has its origin in the Latin words strictus, meaning tight or narrow, and stringere, the verb meaning to tighten. These root words reflect the internal feelings of tightness and constriction of the muscles and breathing reported by many people under stress. Stress is often explained in terms of characteristics of the environment that are disruptive to the individual. Stressors are events that cause our body to give the stress response. Such events include noise, crowding, a bad relationship, or the daily commuting to school or office. The reaction to external stressors is called strain. Lazarus has distinguished between two types of appraisal, i.e. primary and secondary. Primary appraisal refers to the perception of a new or changing environment as positive, neutral, or negative in its consequences. Negative events are appraised for their possible harm, threat, or challenge. Secondary appraisal, which is the assessment of one's coping abilities and resources and whether they will be sufficient to meet the harm, threat, or challenge of the event. These resources may be mental, physical, personal, or social. If one thinks one has a positive attitude, health, skills, and social support to deal with the crises, he will feel less stressed. This two-level appraisal process determines not only our cognitive and behavioral responses but also our emotional and physiological responses to external events. The experience and outcome of a stressor may vary from individual to individual. A person who believes that he can control the onset of a negative situation, or its adverse consequences, will experience less amount of stress than those who have no such sense of personal control. For example, a sense of self-confidence or efficacy can determine whether the person is likely to appraise the situation as a threat or a challenge. Stress includes all those environmental and personal events, which challenge or threaten the well-being of a person. These stressors can be external, such as environmental, noise, air pollution; social, breakup with a friend, loneliness; or psychological, conflict, frustration, within the individual. Very often, these stressors result in a variety of stress reactions, which may be physiological, behavioral, emotional, and cognitive. At the physiological level, arousal plays a key role in stress-related behaviors. The hypothalamus initiates action along two pathways. The first pathway involves the autonomic nervous system. The adrenal gland releases large amount of catecholamines, epinephrine and norepinephrine, into the bloodstream. This leads to physiological changes seen in fight or flight response. The second pathway involves the pituitary gland, which secretes the corticosteroid, cortisol, which provides energy. The emotional reactions to experience of stress include negative emotions such as fear, anxiety, embarrassment, anger, depression, or even denial. Action against stressors. The behavioral responses are virtually limitless, depending on the nature of the stressful event. Confrontative action against the stressor, fight, or withdrawal from the threatening event, flight, are two general categories of behavioral responses. Cognitive responses include beliefs about the harm or threat an event poses and beliefs about its causes or controllability. These include responses such as inability to concentrate and intrusive, repetitive, or morbid thoughts. Individuals' experiences of stress depend on the physiological strength of that person. Thus, individuals with poor physical health and weak constitution would be more vulnerable than would be those who enjoy good health and strong constitution. The stresses which people experience also vary in terms of intensity, low intensity versus high intensity, duration, short-term versus long-term, complexity, less complex versus more complex, and predictability, unexpected versus predictable. The outcome of stress depends on the position of a particular stressful experience along these dimensions. Usually more intense, prolonged, or chronic, complex and unanticipated stresses have more negative consequences than have less intense, short-term, less complex and expected stresses. Psychological characteristics like mental health, temperament, and self-concept are relevant to the experience of stress. The cultural context in which we live determines the meaning of any event and defines the nature of response that is expected under various conditions. Finally, the stress experience will be determined by the resources of the person, such as money, social skills, coping style, support networks, etc. All these factors determine the appraisal of a given stressful situation. Signs and symptoms of stress include lack of concentration, memory loss, poor decision-making, inconsistency, irregular attendance and timekeeping, low self-esteem, poor long-term planning, frantic bursts of energy, extreme mood swings, emotional outbursts, worry, anxiety, fear, depression, difficulties with sleep, difficulties with eating, misuse of drugs, and physical illness, e.g. stomach upset, headache, backache, etc. That's all for today's episode on stress. Remember, stress is a part of life and it's all about how we manage it. Stay tuned for our next episode in the Learn Psychology series. Until then, stay curious and keep learning.